Welcome back, podcast community. This is Three Questions Podcast. My name's Cam King. This is episode 50. I have an amazing guest here, my good friend, recent new friend, Chase Barmore, who is an account executive. He's actually transitioning to a company called Hyros. And Chase, what's going on, man? How are you?
Cameron, it's another one of those days when you just meet somebody off LinkedIn and look, you're on a podcast the next day.
I know everybody's got their podcast these days, and
I love it.
it's crazy. So 50 episodes. I had a podcast before called Intersection Podcast, but it was like hour and a half and two-hour long episodes, and this one is much more shorter, more concise. I think too many people want to be the next Joe Rogan, and I think just having a podcast is a great networking tool, and that's really why I continue to do it. I love to hear people's stories, and obviously the foundation of Three Questions Podcast is just to ask questions and have people share their experience about what it is that they're doing. But you're in Kentucky, correct?
Yes, I'm in Kentucky, in the small town of Baghdad. It's right outside of Frankfurt.
Wow. Did
Yeah.
they just take all these international names and start naming towns in Kentucky, or how did that?
There's no H in Baghdad. It's actually a funny story. It's a mill town, and a family that owned the mill. It's been around since 200 years, and the dad and the son were bagging mill, and the son just kept saying Baghdad, Baghdad as he was filling up the mill. So that's the story of Baghdad, Kentucky. Don't know if it's true, but Bullet Distillery is right in our backyard. Happy to drink a bourbon with anybody if they stop in through.
I'll take you up on that very soon. Right, I'm only a couple states away. Kentucky and North Carolina don't border, do they?
No, they don't border, but very close. Like Asheville's about 6 hours away,
Got it.
or about 4 or 5 hours away. Yeah, from
Yeah,
Asheville.
I'm a very bad North Carolinian, so
It's all good.
we'll see. All right. So, Three Questions Podcast. We just went over the format. We discussed the questions. Again, I want to hear everything you got. And if you're ready, I say we just hop right into question number one. I'll start the timer on my watch. You good?
Let's do it.
All right. Awesome. So, question number one: why do you consider yourself a recovering entrepreneur?
It's a great question. And one of the things that I have learned in my transition from being an entrepreneur to a SaaS seller is anytime that you are in a networking environment, you want to have one of those very quick open lines that piques people's interest. And I have found that saying that I'm a recovering entrepreneur always piques people's interest because they're like, I know recovering alcoholics and recovering drug addicts, but recovering entrepreneur, what does that mean? And so here I am. I've my first business was a valet company in Louisville, Kentucky. Grew that from one location to about 100 locations over a 10-year period of time. Sold that in 2017. Um, and then me and my wife had a juice bar and smoothie bar concept for about 10 years. And COVID really threw a wrench in some things and plans. And so I'm recovering from some COVID losses. And so that's why I call myself recovering entrepreneur.
I think I always thought that once you start the entrepreneurship journey, that it's very addicting and it only stops unless you quit. Because I synonymize being an entrepreneur with being an opportunist, or just being able to be consistent, or just being able to withstand more lessons, more punishment, more wisdoms, more failures than, say, the average person who prefers comfort. What would your definition? This is a good follow up, but what would your definition of an entrepreneur be?
My definition of an entrepreneur, I would again go with you and say someone that never gives up and is just always continuously rolling the dice. And I listened to Alex Hermosi's recent book. It was called $100 Million Leads. And at the very end, he talks about this story, and it's a dice game. I don't know what the dice game is, but basically it's one die, and then there's like a die that has, I think, 60 pieces on it. And the only difference between continuing to play is that you don't stop. And it's like you just got to continue to roll the dice. And the only time that you die is just, or you quit, is when you quit throwing the dice. And
I
I would say that that's my entrepreneur spirit. And it's like never give up.
mhm. I completely agree, and obviously what I do with my one-on-one coaching, then also with my CMO for hire clients, I tell people that all the time. I say, dude, fuck motivation, fuck discipline. You need to focus on being consistent. Even if it's an hour a day, you make one product a day or one blog post, or you reach out to one person. You need to stack that for a long enough time, because at some point, I think even Joe Rogan had, how many hundreds of episodes before he had that meteoric rise. Like, you don't know when things are going to take off, and too many people expect this overnight success when they start a company, when they have a business, when they get a really good idea, and then 1, 2, 3 months into it, they're like, oh, I'm losing money, I'm not making anything, I'm not having fun anymore, and then they tend to quit. What would you say, since we still have 2 more minutes on question number one, and I've now hit you with two follow-up questions, what would you say is the biggest hump, and when do you see people sort of quit or succeed in their entrepreneurship journey?
Yeah, and this really goes back to, I had this conversation with one of my past employees. We used to own this juice bar. It's called Life Bar. And I had this employee, and he was very altruistic and spiritual. And I was like, man, I don't, it's like these juice bars in LA and New York are just blowing up. Why is it not happening here in Louisville? And he's like, Chase, you might just have a 5-year business. It might be that acorn. And if you have ever grown a tree or grown anything, it's like an acorn will grow into a beautiful oak tree, but it takes many years, it takes watering. And I think that is very, and you just have to keep putting and just keep hitting the pavement. And when people tell you no, it's like keep grinding, keep making another call, keep prospecting. No matter, it's like you keep getting that no, you're getting closer to the yes. And I think I don't even know what the question was that you just asked, but I really think so many entrepreneurs just give up when they're like, somebody, they just told me no. And I'm like, well, okay, go. It's like, if you're going after Google or these huge businesses that have 500 or more employees, there's only one person that told you no. There's 499 more people that you potentially could get a meeting with, and they could say yes. And a lot of people will stop at that first no.
I completely agree. I think too, a big mistake that I've seen newer entrepreneurs make is they put a lot of their own self-worth into what other people say or do, especially about their product. Because people that have been in some of these senior roles, they can be pretty brutal if you're trying to sell to them or trying to talk to them or trying to network with them. Some of these people who are in these more established companies tend to have an air of an ego. And I think when your self-worth is attached to the company that you've created or you've made, I think that's something to steer away from. But every no, it's just a redirection towards a future yes. And having that kind of mindset takes a long time to develop if you are a relatively new entrepreneur. But um, we just hit 5 minutes for that. So I'm going to jump to question number two, which I think is extremely important. And I want to know, from your background and your experience, what is it like from owning your own business, a $500,000 business, if that, to being an account executive? What are some of the tactics that you've learned from your own business, and what are some of the things that you do now as an AE, and how do you sell, basically?
Yeah, it's a great question. And one of the strangest things that when I transitioned from being a recovering entrepreneur to becoming a tech account executive, I had these weird things called weekends, these weird things called PTO. Uh, and I've never had those things. I mean, I think when I started Ready Valet, my first business, I was 19 years old. So I'm 37 now. Uh, I've only been in my account executive role working for somebody for like the last year and a half. So it was a very interesting transition, but it really showed me uh, where my strengths were. And one of my strengths is networking and connection building. And dovetailing to what we were just talking about before, especially when you're going out, you have a new product. I'm always trying to provide more value to the people that I connect with than I'm asking for. And it's like I'm always trying to give more. I'm asking, who can I introduce you to? How can I help you? I don't even have really, it's like a startup. I will just go to the founder and I'll say, like, who do you all need to connect with? I don't want any equity of the business. I don't want anything. It's like, I just want to help them. And for some reason, when you do that, people feel either not indebted, but they're like, man, this guy's really helping me out. And you start to get traction in that. So what I've done is really build up my LinkedIn presence, which I already had before a little bit, uh, before starting my role at What Converts, but honing in LinkedIn and creating my own personal brand, networking, and really getting that flywheel effect of who is my ideal customer profile. I won't use the acronyms ICP, uh, but really understanding when I first got into the role of marketing or well, I was selling a product that I really wanted to understand. And that was one of the things why I wanted to jump into this role, is because with my business, I burned so much cash in ads with agencies, and I was really pissed off. And I was like, I want to know how this works right. Who's doing this right? And so that's why I went to this direction of SaaS and marketing tech. And so now I've been encapsulated with the network of agencies that are managing millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're actually converting and working for their clients. And it's like, okay, this is cool to be a part of.
I completely agree. I think when you focus on helping and connecting other people in whatever role you're in, as an entrepreneur or working for a company, you tend to build a spider web and a network that feeds itself. And I think just like in life and in business, if you can focus on helping other people selflessly, right, aiding, connecting, and bridging people together, that just comes back to you tenfold at some point. And I think that's what makes a great account executive. I think part of that is what makes a great entrepreneur. And I couldn't agree with you more there. Um, as an entrepreneur and an account executive, other than networking and building bridges, what do you think are some of the best tips to help sell?
So, very baseline tactical things is I like Calendly. I'm not paid by Calendly to post about their service, but making meetings easy, to have somebody be able to book a meeting with you and make it frictionless, because you don't want to be like, oh, I'm ready next week. I got these two times next week. Make it easy for these people to book a meeting with you. And then also have a CRM and basically have that database of where you can follow up with people. The nice thing about Calendly is it actually captures everyone's email. So then you'll always have those emails. And what I learned in my previous role is emails are gold and the follow up is gold. But if you don't have a system and process to follow up with people, because they might say no now, but 6 months later, if you touch base with them, they'll probably say yes, or, not yet, but you know what? I know this other person that is ready, or I can introduce you to. So I think there's really power and gold and follow up.
Totally. My strategy for years, even when I was a new business director, I would reach out 7 days later. I would do the second one. Third email would be 14 days after the second one. And I would say, hey, looking to close the loop, interested or not, hope I can be a future service to you. Stay in touch. And then I would put something in my CRM to reach out to them in 6 months. Hey, we just did XYZ project. Hope you guys are well. I saw this on your blog post. Looks like you have some really cool updates on LinkedIn. Let me know if you'd like to go out and get a lunch and just build a network. And that would always like, I never had people be like, no, fuck you. Maybe it was like 1 to 2% of that every once in a while. Like, fuck you, stop soliciting me. People can be brutal over email sometimes, but for the most part, you know, when you have someone's email, you have a very intimate access to that person, not to be able to sell them, but just to be able to communicate at their own time. And I think when you're respective of that, and when you actually put in a kind of curated email, I know everything's different with AI, but when you can actually curate a personal response, showing that person that you've taken stock and interest in them, they tend to be more kind and more receptive to what you want to sell, because I'm sure you would agree, but people do business with people that they know, like, trust, and then need is the last one. And I think it's very much in that order from my experience. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I would definitely. And I would say LinkedIn is also one of my tools that I've just heavily leaned in as well, to close the loop. LinkedIn has been gold for me. That's how I found my roles. That's how I've found a bunch of my ICPs, now I'll call them, ideal customer profiles. And it's when you start to like, if you go to a networking event, if you go to a luncheon, if you go to a conference, you can understand who's there. And you, once you identify the role that you really can help, then you just start to go after that role and you specifically know what their needs are, what their pain points are, and how you can help them potentially. And it's a, once you know that, it's like, and then the cold calling is not even, I don't even call it cold calling. It's more of a warm call because you're helping them out, because you're like, I know the pains of what you're going through and I potentially have a solution. Would you want to take 15 minutes with me to talk about this?
Absolutely. And that is a conversation I literally had with one of my CMO for hire clients late last night. And we were talking about different templates and how to reach out and how to do biz dev. This guy, and I hope he's listening to the podcast, but he is focusing on the lower aspect of his business right now. He's like doing video editing and trying to build web pages. I'm like, brother, you got to focus on the high level stuff. And we were talking about templates, and he was like, well, I know what these clients, potential clients problems are. And I asked him, and I was like, would you ever tell a woman or a person or a man what their problem is? If I said, hey, Joe, your problem is this, you would probably get defensive. And he agreed. And I was like, you never want to tell someone what their problem is, right? Nor do you want to assume, but you want to create a safe space of trust for them to tell you exactly what their problem is that day. And if you can have that sort of empathy, it tends to make the sell a little bit easier, right? Because when you lead with the sell, that tends to not work out. People are very defensive. People get blasted by 300 emails a day and every other notification on the planet. And I think when you can actually create a safe space, hey, let's have a conversation. I'd love to hear what your challenges are, right? I'd love to be a resource for you now or in the future, and maybe introduce you to somebody who can help you if it's a different problem than primarily with what I work with. And I think empathy is not really something it's being talked about more in sales. I see that on LinkedIn a lot, but empathy and creating a safe place for that communication to open up is like, that's what every sales leader needs.
And also, I would take it a step further of saying, and I've started to use this in my demos, and I would close faster. I'm actually part of a group called GTM United, and they have a great sales training there. But it's consultative selling, and I would just enter the conversation and say, you know what? I don't even know if I don't even want to sell to you. I just want to make sure that you make the right decision, and I'm here to help you. And if our product is not right, I'll help you to point you in the right direction. And really, you go to that consultative level and you really can understand people's pains and you can help people. And that's what I've learned in my entrepreneur and AE role is so many people just want to turn and burn. And it's the sale is not really just the sale, it's the onboarding, it's the customer service post sale. Like that's really where you're going to forge that relationship and then you're going to get referrals from that customer, and that's the goal.
Totally. It's all about referrals and just, again, building that network. Um, well, we're a little bit over on that one. We went almost 10 minutes, but hey,
Ooh,
that's what these
all right,
conversations are for.
all right.
I want to ask you question number 3. Okay. And we've had a brief conversation about this, and you mentioned this early in the podcast, but you had a business that was making 600K a year in revenue as an entrepreneur. Why did you leave that and go to work as a strategic account executive?
It's a great question, and it took a pandemic for me to find that out. uh I so Life Bar was the business that we're talking about, and we were inside of a local health food store. We had multiple locations, about 15 staff, and we were doing smoothies. And I mean, I had managers. My wife was my partner, and but it was very difficult. And people would call in all the time. I don't have. I worked. I think the last 3 years before we closed Life Bar, when COVID happened, I worked every day for 3 years straight. Um, and that was just because I had to. And I would show up because I knew like lunch rush there would be issues, so I had to be there. And what COVID helped me to do is take a step back, and it forced us. So like we were forced to close down. We were shut down by the government, and we were like, what are we going to do? And so we tried to create a CPG brand online, sort of like Daily Harvest. to where we were shipping ready to blend smoothies to people's houses. And then we had our own protein product that we were going to sell on Amazon. We had our adaptogens, already had all the products. And so I thought the manufacturing would be the hardest part of doing that business. But the hardest part of that business was the digital marketing. And I would get served these ads for like Gary Vaynerchuk and all these people. And I was like, man, selling online is going to be easy. And it was extremely difficult. And that's where I walked away. We we tried everything. I mean, we tried Google ads, we tried Facebook ads, we tried programmatic ads, we tried affiliates, we tried influencers, we tried Amazon, and everything just led to no, it just wasn't going to work. And so we were part of Shopify for Startups. And after 2.5 years of trying to get back to the revenue that we were doing post pandemic, I went to my Shopify rep and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And she's like, I think you'd be great in SaaS sales. And I said, I don't even know what that is. And she's like, these are all the plugins on the back end of Shopify and their companies you could work at. And I'm like, I love this. This is great. So it took a pandemic to shut me down. And
Yeah.
I'm really hard headed and pig headed.
Yeah, I love that. And those are my people, right? Very, very hard-headed. And I used to throw myself into the fire, right? Like I was working full time and then I built two businesses and I walked away similar to you. I think over the span of maybe 2 or 3 years, I got a CrossFit travel company that I built with my bare hands and my best friend. We got that to like 1.5 million in revenue. Granted, our costs were like 1.3, but we put everything else into hiring people and paying stuff for staff, and it was great. Like we had a team of I think almost 10, and it was a fantastic side project with a lot of success. And similar to you, I my life changed right after the pandemic. I got furloughed from my job and was never brought back. I started freelancing a bunch, and obviously I made a pretty big pivot into what I'm doing now. I don't really talk about that on the podcast much, but for me, I had to walk away. And the stress of working full time and building a business, and I got out of a long-term relationship at the time. I was like, man, this is too much. I didn't realize that I had been burning the candle on both ends, and that
Mm-hmm.
everything was essentially on fire, and I was just constantly putting stuff out. I was looking back, I was suffering from adrenal fatigue, and I
Yep.
think this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs need, because when you're stressed out all the time and you're waking up at 4:30, you're trying to run and stay fit and meditate and do breath work and take cold showers and do everything that all the guys tell you to do. You're just like you're trying to keep up with all of these highlights, right? You don't need to be David Goggins every single day. And I
No.
think that entrepreneurship journey, it when the juice isn't worth the squeeze anymore, you need to be honest with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And if going back and doing something like SaaS sales allows you to have weekends and allows you to enjoy time with your wife and to not have everything be about business all the time, or to just have that looming over your head, I think that takes a very, very strong person to be able to admit that. So I commend you for that, because it's not something that everybody does. And I've seen a lot of people let entrepreneurship ruin them for sure.
And now moving forward, it's like if it's not working in 6 months, I'm going to pull the plug. And it's I don't have to force it to work. And the environment, you talk about environment, and I think social media, and I know a lot about, or well, I don't know a lot about social media, but I'm on there a lot. And one of the things is I was in this health food realm, so I thought everybody was gluten free, allergic to corn, had these crazy, was vegan, was paleo, all these different diets. And I was like, is the whole world like this? And it wasn't. It was just because that was where I was. And it took me to like completely remove myself from that environment. And now it's like I can come out of where I'm at, and it's like I'm in Kentucky, and it's like beautiful. Kentucky is a beautiful state, um, but it's being relaxed and not being so rigid and just I gotta make it. It has to be this way. And a quick story. So this was an issue that I had with my valet company. Is I would be valeting for like Papa John's, the CEO of Papa John's, or for the CEO that had a bunch of different Wendy's franchises. And I would be seeing these guys. I'd be parking all these Ferraris or whatever the cars were, and I would just be seeing them visually. And I had Life Bar at the same time, and I'd be like, man, I just got to have more units, and I got to have more stores. That's the only way I'm going to make more money. And if I would have known the truth, it's like, man, I should have started a franchise and let other people run my shit. That's how they made their millions or billions, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I learned so much.
I think that's a goal. And one of my favorite quotes that I live by is that you never lose, you either win or you learn. And I think whether you're an entrepreneur or you're just working, Nelson Mandela said that, Conor McGregor have said that, obviously two very different individuals. But that's something that I really try and live by. And when you have that mindset, I think these lessons allow you to make that decision faster. I don't know if you've ever read Seth Godin's book, The Dip, but he talks about if you start something and it's not working out, quit early. Because if you go into this inevitable dip of starting a company and you're down at the bottom of the dip, you better continue working your way out there, because if you quit here, it's going to cost you a lot more. And it's a very fascinating concept because he talks about all of these startups or endeavors that some of these big companies will make, and how they either inevitably go through that dip and come out and become a market leader, where they say, actually, you know what, these companies are doing it better, our resources can be allocated somewhere else better, so that we don't have to go through as big of a dip or as long of a dip. And it's very interesting to me. So I appreciate the insight here. I don't know
Yeah.
if you have anything you want to add. I don't know if you want to let people know how to reach you or get in touch with you, what they should reach out to you
Of
for.
course, they can reach me at any time. I'm on LinkedIn. Just look up Chase Barmore on LinkedIn. I am on Instagram, not as much, at Mr. Life Bar. Uh, and I'm happy to help anyone. And especially if you're going through a tough time, just know that you're going to be able to get through it. Just continue to push and continue to ask for help. And one of the things that was amazing to me when I first got into tech sales is I just would cold outreach people and say, hey, do you have 15 minutes to talk? And it's amazing how many people will give up their time. And
Yeah.
those people will help you. People want to help people. It's not all
Yes.
bad it's not all like the news. It's you put it out there, and just there's a lot of humanity out there, and I would say the majority of people are wanting to see your cause move forward. I know I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Time is the only, it's the most important resource that we have. It's non-renewable. And I think that's the most important gift that you can give someone is your time and attention, especially in a world where all of these other companies are competing for our attention, right? Look at all the social media. So Chase, I am super grateful for your time. Obviously, I'll include all of your information down in the podcast description. And I hope to have you on a future episode. I know you're starting a new business, but it's Friday afternoon. So I hope you absolutely enjoy your weekend. And I will sure as hell let you know when I am up in Kentucky and we can go to that bullet factory, because I would love to go.
Hell yeah, man. Bullet and what is the other one? Buffalo Trace. I mean, bourbon is don't be sleeping on bourbon. It's exploding.
Yeah, especially in Kentucky, right? Land of moonshine.
That's right.
Um,
All right. Well, thanks, Cameron.
yeah, we'll see you in a future one, Chase. And I
Okay.
appreciate you.